Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone to the Living Parsha. It's another week and another two Parshas. This week is again a double Parsha, double header, which is exciting. Last week also. Just a little background why double Parshas happen. And not everyone knows this. Some of you may know this. There are 53 Parshas in Torah, and we want to get through the cycle in a week, in a year, which is 52 weeks. So there's already an imbalance, right? An extra parsha we have to sneak in there. And then we miss some parashas on weekends because they are holidays. For example, on Pesach, you have a special Pesach reading, so we skip the regular cycle. And then when Pesach ends, we go back to our regular cycle of reading. We lost out a week. So depending on the year, how many weekends we lose out on, and how many we need to double up parshas in order to cram in the 53 parshas in any given number of weeks. Usually you have 48 or 49 weekends a year, which we're having this cycle. So 3, 4 parshas will be doubled up. And if it's a leap year, you have an extra few weeks, and so less parshas doubled. So every year is slightly different. There's a whole calculation goes into this, which parshas are kind of first to be doubled. Very similar themes, almost two halves of one parsha, which parshas are we're more hesitant to double up. So there's a lot that goes into this. Acharei Kedoshim, it's just these two parshas this week are double. So we'll go through the themes of the parsha and then get into today's lesson. Acharei begins, literally the words mean after the death. Acharei after death. After the death of Aaron's sons. And we learned about this a couple of weeks ago. Aaron's children, on the day of the inauguration of the temple, his two sons tragically died as part of the service, doing the service that they weren't supposed to, and their lives were snuffed out way too soon. And this parasha picks up the story from there. After the death of Aaron's children, God tells Aaron, the Holy of Holies is off limits. You're only meant to go there on occasion of Yom Kippur. And so the parasha opens up with the service of Yom Kippur in the temple. We actually read this parasha on Yom Kippur every single year. It also forms the basis of the Musaf Amidah Yom Kippur when we go through the service. So the entire Yom Kippur of ancient temple times is described in this parasha. And that's the first half of Parsha Acharei, going through what the high priest would do, the clothing he'd wear, the change into the white clothing when he went to the Holy of Holies. 5 times throughout the day he'd switch clothing. We read about the 2 goats. That one was as an offering, one was sent to the wilderness and thrown off a cliff, the scapegoat, the original scapegoat. And so fascinating details of this service, the incense, which the high priest will bring into the Holy of Holies, and smoke would billow up throughout the whole Holy of Holies. And then we come to an interesting ruling, a mitzvah, that offerings and sacrifices from when the temple was built were only allowed to be offered in the temple. And in ancient times, people would offer sacrifices all over the place. All right. I'm good. Just going over the parsha. In ancient times, people would offer sacrifices everywhere. Wherever you wanted to worship God, you built an altar and you offered a sacrifice. And we're told now that it has to be offered only in the temple. And in that context, we are told that the blood had to be sprinkled in the temple. And when you slaughter an animal to eat, you're not allowed to eat the blood. And we're going to get back to this particular detail and focus on it tonight, the prohibition of eating blood. But we'll get back to that soon. In the meantime, the parsha ends with a list of illicit sexual relationships that Torah prohibits. And we actually read this in the afternoon service of Yom Kippur because it follows through in the same parsha. But the juxtaposition is always interesting, that after sort of the holiest service, the high priest on Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies, we're being told the most almost base sexual prohibitions, about incest and about all kinds of things, bestiality. And there's something there, a lot of ways to reflect that. One explanation is that no matter how holy you get, you know, don't forget the morality has its place. You're still human. There's still going to be temptation, and never convince yourself that you're sort of holier than anything else. Always be on your guard. You have to have the guardrails in place. You don't fall for a moral failure. And that's the end of the first parsha. Then we go into Kedoshim, which literally means holy. And the verse opens up with a very important mitzvah, a very vague mitzvah. And the mitzvah is, you should be holy. What does that mean? We'll get to that a little later as well, what that means, the mitzvah to be holy. But in this part of Kedoshim, we're told many, many mitzvahs that run the gamut of all forms of mitzvahs of social morality, about treating poor people, about honoring your parents, about loving your neighbors yourself. So there are many laws here. In fact, 51 mitzvahs are in this parasha. If you do the math, there are 613 mitzvahs in the whole Torah. So it means 1 in 12 are found in this week's second parsha, which is a bit over 8%. That's a pretty fair amount for one parsha. And then at the end of the parsha, we're told about different idol worships that people have to refrain from and forms of foreign worship. That's an overview of the entire parsha. So the two details I want to focus on tonight is the prohibition against eating blood and also the mitzvah to be holy. And I think they are linked. But let's start with eating blood or drinking blood, probably is a better way to put it. Torah has a very strange obsession or fascination with blood. There's about probably 6 or 7 times that Torah addresses this specific commandment, telling us we're not allowed to drink the blood of an animal. Okay? That's more than Shabbos, more than all the fundamental mitzvahs. I may have mentioned once, some of them twice. And there's some really weird obsession that any opportunity Torah has, it tells us don't drink the blood of the animal you slaughter. Later on in Deuteronomy, the terminology used is rak chazak. Be very strong, hold yourself very strong, and don't drink blood. And so it seems to be there's something that Torah is getting at, that specifically drinking blood either is very challenging, it has to be continuously taught, or is so important that we don't drink it, that it has to be warned again and again. And even in the Parsha, we're going to read the verses here, and it's like way overdone. So if you have a Chumash in front of you, or you have the text, we're in chapter 17, page 724. Verse 10, chapter 17, verse 10, 725. So the enter the house of Israel, born Israelites, or the converts who dwell among them, who consumes any such blood, whether sacrificial or non-sacrificial animals. The punishment, I will set my attention upon the individual who consumes the blood. I will cut him off from among his people. So God is saying, I'm going to not just punish them, I'm going to set my attention on them. Not a very common phrase. And then it continues. Because the soul in the flesh of any creature is dependent upon the blood. I have therefore given to you, not to consume, but to be placed upon the altar to atone for your souls. For it is only the blood that can atone for the soul of the owner. And then in verse 14 it continues. Because the soul of all flesh, the blood, represents the soul. And therefore said to Israelites, you must not consume blood of any animal flesh, the soul of any flesh of his blood. All consumed will be cut off. So really, three times in a row almost, hold the same thing, right? So in the blood, you cut it off. The blood is a cold animal, you cut it the blood. If someone's the blood, I will cut them off. It's a very intense little paragraph here that if I was an editor and God came to me with his, script, there'd be a lot of straight throughs here. There's a lot of extra words, a lot of repetitions that seem to be unnecessary. Just say it once. Looking blood is terrible. You cut off. So, what is it about blood that really gets God's blood boiling? Any ideas why the prohibition of blood would be so? God would have a real intense aversion to it. Any suggestions? All right, nobody. No one's shut. So the commentaries have a wide range of suggestions here of why there's a real strong obsession with blood, and they run the entire spectrum. On one sort of rational end of the spectrum, we have Maimonides, who says in ancient pagan cultures there was a lot of blood rituals, and they believed that drinking the blood gave them access to their spirits, and Torah was trying to wean the Jewish people off of these pagan rites and rituals. And so emphasize again and again, you count the blood, you sprinkle the blood in the temple. In other words, we are taking this idea and we're using our temple service, but not for a person to drink and to consume as a pagan ritual. So he looks at it as a warning against engaging with foreign ideas, Judaism, which is why it's emphasized so much. The Talmud actually has a dispute. It's interesting how this works. One rabbi in Talmud says it must be that people loved drinking blood, and therefore to warn again and again and again against it because people were obsessed with it. Another rabbi says, no way. Let's discuss it. No one likes drinking blood, but there must have been something they felt uh, about blood that they wanted to drink it. And Torah is saying because it's so disgusting, because it's so inhumane, therefore don't drink it. So whether it's some delicacy in ancient times or whether it wasn't disgusting is in itself debated. So those are all kind of rational reasons why Torah would have this repetition about the blood. Others have more moral concerns. There's a work called the Sefer HaChinuch. It's a very beautiful work. The author is unknown. It's assumed to be one of the Rishonim, so one of the sort of I think the 12th century, but it's unknown who exactly the author is. And it goes through all the mitzvahs in the order of the parashas. And so it lists the mitzvah of each parasha with all the details. So it gives you like usually 2 or 3 paragraphs who the mitzvah is addressed to, the reason for the mitzvah, the parameters of the mitzvah. It's a very, foundational work. And he writes there the reason he thinks that you're not allowed to consume blood is to teach sensitivity. Blood is kind of, if you see a lot of blood and it desensitizes you to violence, to bloodshed, and the Torah wants us to have a sensitivity towards blood, and therefore it says, don't drink it. In fact, we're told later in these verses, when you slaughter certain animals and fowl, it says mitzvah to cover the blood with dust or sawdust. And this is done till today. In the slaughterhouse, when they slaughter a chicken, they give a special blessing to cover the blood, and they cover with the blood. And he says along the same lines, Torah is teaching us sensitivity, that blood shouldn't be something common in your life. There's a little bit you should be not desensitized to it. That's a more of a moral idea. Others have a similar idea that we are taking the life of an animal. And that in itself is kind of controversial, right? What gives us, human beings, the right to take the life of another living creature for our own consumption? And I think we discussed this before, what right we have to eat animals. But basically, whatever animals you're going to have, this is kind of pushing back against that a little bit. You can eat the animal, but you got to give the animal its respect. The blood, which Torah here clearly says carries the soul, is a life force of the animal. Don't eat that. It's almost like you're robbing the animal of its very life. It's one thing, the meat you need for energy and we need to have the nutrients and whatever, fine. But to drink the blood is kind of like robbing the animal of any uh, identity that it had. And that's taking it too far. That Torah didn't want you to steal its very identity, its very soul. Others say, kind of a more spiritual level, that since the soul, the life of an animal is pumped through the blood, if you drink the blood, tendencies of the animal will become part of your own system. And you'll develop those animalistic tendencies. So it'll actually have an effect. The soul of the animal kind of will be merging with your own soul. And that's going to spiritually desensitize you. You become kind of animalistic. And so the animal soul remains where it is. So these are all very beautiful and valid ideas. One more beautiful idea I learned this year for the first time, and it comes from Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, is known as Gershonite. And he's also, I think, 13th century, if I remember correctly. I think a Spanish rabbi. And he says something very interesting. He said, Torah emphasized the reason we kind of blood is because the blood is the seat of the soul. And he understands this to mean more philosophically. And he says blood, which creates life both in the human and the animal, is kind of a proof of God. The fact that I can eat something, it becomes my blood and sustains me as a living creature, breathing consciousness, says that's like divine. And the fact that my food becomes blood inside of me is in itself a meditation of the fact that I'm being sustained by God and created in divine image that we can live, and God created a perfect world that we're able to breathe and be living creatures. Because drinking the blood takes away from that a little bit, because blood, becoming blood, doesn't seem to be so creative. But the food is able to be digested and go into my bloodstream. That is like the wonder of nature that amazes the person and brings them closer to divine awareness. And so he said, drinking blood is going to dull our divine awareness, our awe of God, our amazement of the marvel of the biology. So it's another interesting idea. So whenever, I always say this, whenever there's a lot of answers to a question, it usually means none of them are great, right? If it was anything was so obvious, we'd have a pretty simple answer. And we have 10 different answers to one question, it means the question often is better than the answer. And none of them are entirely satisfactory. So all of these explain why blood is not allowed to be eaten. But I don't know if they account for the emphasis and the overemphasis on the prohibition of drinking blood. Just as a totally side point, this is all about animal blood. There's no reference in Torah about human blood. Is human blood kosher or not? Is there a prohibition against drinking human blood? It's a good question. Is there a prohibition against human flesh? Not a good question. And so this is a very big debate, whether there's a biblical prohibition against cannibalism. And if there is, sort of under which category of is it? Some say that it is absolutely. I will say everyone agrees it's not allowed. The question is whether it's biblical, whether it's sort of post-biblical, and whether, if it's biblical, under what category of prohibition does it fall under, because there's no explicit reference to it. Some say it's so obvious you don't need a reference to it. We're saying animals that are kosher, you can't drink their blood. A human being, of course, you can't drink their blood. If an animal soul in the blood is a human soul. So it's just an interesting thing to think about out of the box. There are some who believe if you're stuck on a desert island and there's a choice, and I want to graphic you, the choice between eating non-kosher animal, which is clearly prohibited by Torah, versus a human corpse. There are some, I think most people would say they don't kosher animals way to go. There are some that would say you're better off because of no explicit prohibition. Okay, we're gonna do that here. But I advise against that. Either way, it's an interesting thing. It's all about kosher, the blood of kosher animals. That's the prohibition here, which is why kosher meat is always a little salty. Because when you slaughter an animal and you have the meat, you have to extract all the blood out of the meat before you're allowed to cook it and eat it. And they have this process of salting where they salt the meat in very coarse salt that draws out the blood for like an hour. It sits in the salt and it drains the blood out of the meats. And only then is it kosher to consume, which incidentally is the root of kosher salt. Right? You go to the store, you see kosher salt. What makes this salt kosher about other salt? It's not kosher. No, this salt was from the koshering process. They used coarse salt. And so the name became kosher salt.
I have a question. Is this the Orthodox Jews that I know always eat well done meat, even steak, when every gourmet chef says steak should be medium rare?
So I think that's just a lack of appreciation of good meat more than anything else. There is, and we'll get to that in a second whether that's a good thing or not. But the salted meat, it says a little salty. It doesn't have to, you can eat it rare, you can eat it however you like. There is one exception, and I've experienced this before. If you roast the meat right away, and you're not cooking it, you're grilling it, and it's dripping. So on a spit or some kind of grill where everything's dripping down, you can eat it fresh, not salted. There was one time, that's timely, Lag BaOmer, which next Thursday night and Friday is a big celebration, and one of the things it celebrates or it commemorates is the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's the author of the Zohar, and he's buried in Meron, in the hills near Tzfat, in the north of Israel. And Lag BaOmer is a mass pilgrimage. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people to this Meron, to the site of his burial. And if you remember, a few years ago, there was a tragic stampede, and many people died. And they've now sort of limited how many people go there and made it safer. One year I was in Israel, and we camped out. It was a Saturday night. Lag BaOmer was Saturday night, Sunday. Once a Shabbos, we camped out for Shabbos in a tent on the hills of Meron. And there was a lot of people camped there. They had big meals in these mass tents. We had a few friends. We camped out for Shabbos. It was a wonderful experience. And then they had these like live animal markets on Saturday night. People apparently are accustomed to have bonfires, a big custom like BaOmer, and barbecues, and they were selling sheep, literally, or English sheep, yeah. And you basically buy this live animal. They have a shofet there on the spot. They slaughter a few, and they cut off all the skin. They skin it. They cut off the fat so you can't eat, and they give you literally an hour later. You're sitting there with fresh meat and the grill, and we barbecued the fresh meat I had. Right, literally. I saw this animal, and then a couple hours later, we were eating that. It's an experience of its own. But we didn't have salt meat because we were grilling it in it. So in that specific way, you can get around salting it. Right, yeah. I guess kind of, right? Yeah. Bring it in salt for a while, then wash that off. That's all get rid of the blood. So these are all suggestions of why blood, but I think there's more to it. And here's an interesting idea that I think gives a general picture, and it's a theme we've spoken about a few times, but it's highlighted in the parsha here as well. So we're going to pause this question for a second, put it on hold, and go to the second parsha, Kedoshim. The first verse, the beginning of the second parsha of the week. So we're on page 735, chapter 19, verse 1. We've done the parsha this week, so we have two parshas. So here, God spoke to Moses saying, you must speak to the entire community of the Israelites, saying to them, you must be holy, for I, God, your God, am holy. Okay. This is one of the most obscure mitzvahs. It's counted in the 613. It gets its own count as a mitzvah. You must be holy. That's a full-letter word that is so nondescript, so abstract and vague. What does God want from us? What does it mean to be holy? Any suggestions what that would mean? What's the mitzvah? What is the definition of holiness? That we have a mitzvah to be holy.
Like that, like also like that. God's name is holy. And what does it really mean? What is that? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I hate these terms we throw around that are these words that are kind of hollow because no one knows what they mean. We kind of get the general idea as we use the word, but we actually don't really have a good grasp on what we're saying. So what does it mean, holy? Say God is holy, we have to be holy. The very beginning of Judaism, at Sinai, in the days leading up to the revelation, God tells Moses, I'm choosing the Jewish people, but Atem Tiyuli, you should be for me, Mamlechas Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, the Goy Kadosh, and a holy nation. So the defining character and title of the Jewish people is a holy nation. What does holy mean? Any suggestions? Any ideas?
Well, I think it's just like it describes to a world view that there's a moral order to the world, and you have to be on the side of that moral order.
So holy means follow the moral code. Okay. The thing is that is, I mean, let's take our contemporary definitions. When we think of holy, we don't think of someone just doing the moral thing. You're a good guy.
Right.
Right? You think of holy is like maybe a long white beard or someone on a mountaintop, extra. And you're suggesting holy means just do the right thing. Right? So first of all, then it's not an ad mitzvah. It's just do all the mitzvah telling you. Right? It wouldn't be a mitzvah itself.
Right.
I've already told all the mitzvah what's the next one and be holy. And secondly, it kind of seems like more than that, right? Holiness just seems beyond just doing the right things. So sometimes I think holy would actually make more sense if you put a W before it. Holy, right? How does holy invest in what you're doing? Fully present to and aware of the life you're living. I think that's sometimes a good definition. So a person can do the right things and can be towing the line, but the character isn't there. Someone of holy is they're living it, they're breathing it, they are embodying the practice that they are practicing. They're fully invested in it. I'll give you a few definitions that the commentaries bring. Rashi has the most surprising. Rashi, the foremost commentary, notices something very interesting. He says, whenever Torah uses the expression to be holy, it's almost always, maybe always, in the context of sexual misconduct. And Rashi says, be holy means do not do anything sexually inappropriate. Whenever it's all the illicit sexual behaviors, Torah says, be holy, don't do that. Which is interesting to think that holiness just means do not sexually deviate. Or in other words, it is such strong human drive that is to not fall prey. That drive means you need a certain strength or character, and that's holiness. Or at least holiness in the context that Torah uses it. Maybe colloquially we'll use it in a broader section, but Torah uses holiness, Rashi says, in that context. Other commentaries don't like Rashi's approach. It's very limited, it's very narrow. One of the more famous approaches is that of Nachmanides, the Ramban, and he says something interesting. And maybe you alluded to this, Jordan, before. He says, you can follow the letter of the law, of Jewish law, all of it, but not be a good person. You're technically doing everything right, but your character is off. So the example he gives is you can eat kosher food and everything prepared properly, but you're a glutton. You're just grabbing food, eating constantly, and that matters. And you're a base person, right? So he says there's the strict letter of the law, and then there's the values that Torah prescribes between the lines. It's not legal. It's not something you can't get prosecuted for it. But it's if you learn Torah, you should have sort of a sense of what being a good, refined person is. So in Torah says, be holy, it means work on your character. Not everything Torah allows should you be doing. There's a Hasidic saying that says, it's in Yiddish, but the saying says, what you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to do. What you're allowed to do, you don't always have to do. Meaning there's certain area, a gray area, where technically you could do it, but it's not moral, it's not the right thing. And this applies in all areas of life. Take business, right? Take taxes, or even, in business deals with people. There are loopholes and ways you can get around, and you really gonna do that to the guy? Technically, you have a technicality, and there's a way you can word the contract, but it's not our business. You can never get caught, and you win if you go to court, but it's not a match. Right? My father always tells me, his father, my grandfather, was started a real estate company in Australia. My father still a family business, and my father says my grandfather was known in the wider kind of business community. He came from Europe after the war as being a very trustworthy person, and he father prides himself on his father. His handshake, his word, he didn't need a contract. Like everyone knew, his word was the word. That's like you can understand, right? That's being it should be that everyone should know if you're a Jew and you're living up to a certain standard of life, then your word is the word. Does that mean the legal basis for backing out? Of course there is. But that's not the right thing to do. And the same is true in our when we eat, when we behave. Second thing on Shabbos, I can get around the law. It's not in a character. And so there's a certain extra what's what I'm looking for. It's not a text, it's not in the mitzvahs, but there's kind of something, a meta halachic value system that we're meant to be absorbing and living by. And the Ramban says that is the mitzvah of being holy. Be holy means you have to live a moral code that's beyond the letter of the law. That's very wide ranging. It's I think kind of similar to Rashi in a sense, but taking it a little further. Meaning not the letter of the law, but there are certain even within the realm of sexual misconduct that's not technically, but it's not appropriate. And so extending that to a much broader effect is that abstain from things that are inappropriate, even if there's no technical mitzvah against it. And that itself, he says, is a mitzvah. So now it became written into law itself, which gets complicated, That now that's illegal because it's part of it's a mitzvah to do things that aren't mitzvahs. But that's a a kind of philosophical discussion for itself, when it ends up. But that's a very sort of simple reading of this. Being holy means live a little beyond the letter. Be a good person, even more than the law of humanity, even more than Torah absolutely makes you do. Be holy. Others understand the idea of holiness as being transcendent. And actually, the literal word of In Hebrew, holiness comes from Kedusha. Kadosh means separate. It means it's something separated from everything else, distinct. For example, the work week is the regular day of the week. Shabbat, we say Shabbat Kodesh. It's in the Kiddush. Shabbat is holy. Means it's distinct. It's different from the other days of the week. It's something we step back from our engagement and we're removed from the regular mundane activities. So holiness means you're transcending the regular living plane, the regular structure of life that you're engaged in, and you are rising above it.
It's something God that sort of not everyone is separate and used to be I'm your God. Your God is holy.
Right.
I'm not everything. I'm a circle thing.
Right. So yes,
there's other things that are not me.
If you describe God as holy in this context, it means God is also removed from the world. Yes.
Yeah.
And God is transcendent. Yes. It's interesting in Hasidic text, it says there's sort of different expressions of God. And we refer to God as holy, we're referring to the transcendent God. God that is not found in the world as kind of only transcendent. There is also sort of an expression of God that isn't referred to as holy, that's manifested in the world, immanent.
What's the expression of that?
I mean, there's this divinity that's accessible.
Where does that?
So in the contrast, in davening we say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavalos, God is holy. And the next time we say, Baruch Kavod Hashem Mekomeh. The word Baruch, blessed, means it's brought down, it's within. So that sometimes is a distinction that's brought. So yes, Kadosh, holiness, we are trying to emulate divine holiness. It's us. God, you can't find God necessarily in these physical things. You have to transcend, and so we should be transcendent as well. We should be removed from these things. But that's not necessarily on a strict level a Jewish value. We've seen this very often. That Judaism wants us to engage within the world. And if you look actually at the mitzvahs described here, this is a sort of introductory. God says, Moses, gather all the Jewish people, tell them, be holy. What's the next verse? Honor your parents, observe Shabbat, don't do idol worship. And then he goes on to speak about very, take care of the poor, don't cheat people. So if you look at what is under the headline of be holy, these aren't very transcendent things. A lot of them are very engaged, very
hold yourself to a high standard. But these are pretty basic things. I mean, idols, respect to others, those are all commandments. They're still right.
Correct. Yeah.
Try to call it. Get into some other things here.
Well, if you look for example, later on, verse 10. We're getting into very simple. These things for the poor. And then verse 11, don't steal, don't cheat. And then we get into verse 14, don't curse out the people that are vulnerable, and don't cheat people, and the blind person with something block. These are very, very, very basic social code that seems not so holy. So yes, maybe means you make sure you have to uphold yourself to a high code. This should be a lifestyle, because we know in any given society, no matter how moral and ethical people are, everyone's looking after their own benefit. And yes, people are going to cheat each other, people are going to cheat on each other, people are going to be unfair. And that's normal, unfortunately, for the human species, for our societies. And God is saying, be holy. Instead of, I want you to rise above. I want you to be transcendent. I want you to be unique people that are above the fray. But that shouldn't mean you don't engage. That has to translate into a very honest engagement with society. So the holiness kind of has two sides to the way I look at it. It's having a certain transcendence, which translates into being a very good person in the here and now, in the everyday social interactions. Because if you want to be a very moral person, just kind of relying on your own morality and society and sort of make sense to be a good person, utilitarian ethics. It doesn't work. Ultimately, our greed, our drive for more is going to always win over, not necessarily every person, but on a societal level. And people are going to end up cheating on other people. You're going to end up creating a class division and the wealthy people preying on the poor. It's going to be inevitable. Unfortunately, it's part of the human condition. We are very self-centered. We are driven by our own ego, our own needs, and relying on just being good people within the structure of society is never going to be enough. The only way you can have what I call the horizontal ethics is if you have a vertical ethic, which means if you're committed to God, you're transcendent, you have a commitment which goes beyond the here and now. You're living for a higher purpose. You're living for more. Then you can translate into being a good person no matter what, even at the cost of your own benefit. What's stopping me? If no one will ever find out, no one will ever know, I won't get caught. What's stopping me from stealing or from being unethical in business? How many people really have that backbone, that really strong moral backbone, that if you will know, imagine I can tell you the 100% certainty, imagine that you will never get caught, no one will ever know. Would you cheat a company? Right? So I think you ask the question on the street, a lot of people say, I'll never do it. In practicality, I think a lot of people would. Yeah, thanks. Because we're human. And to be holy, I think, is this two-sided coin. It means to have a transcendent sense of God, to be beyond the world, to care for things that are immaterial. And that has to translate into a very deep and strong engagement in a very positive way, in a moral way in the world. And so there's this two sides to this sort of holiness, which I think is a defining quality of Judaism and the Jewish mission. We have to engage with society. We have to be people that are part of the world, both on a societal level and on a personal level. We're not meant to be fasting all day and meditating on the mountaintops. No. Eat, drink, involved in social activities, be right. We don't have our priests aren't celibate, right? We're meant to be married, relationships, children. We're meant to be engaging in the world. But together with that, there has to be some sort of caution, some sort of pushback. Like the Ramban says, don't do everything. Hold back from all your desires, even if they're technically kosher. How do you have that? By living for a transcendent truth, by being connected on a high. There's a beautiful little anecdote they tell of a rabbi named Rameir Premishlan. He lived about 200 years ago, Civic rabbi. And a very interesting character. He would dip in a mikvah, in a ritual, in a little pool every morning for his purity and sanctity. And he was on a very steep mountain, to walk up a mountain. He wasn't a young man. And in the winter, it was rainy and muddy. And he would go no matter what, day in, day out, he would go. And people couldn't believe how he did this. And a few young people said, there's no way he does this. We're going to follow him and see. And they tried, and they were slipping and sliding. They couldn't make it up the mountain. They saw he walked up the mountain and went there to immerse in the mikvah. When he came down, they asked him, how do you manage to do this? You are no spring chicken. How do you climb up? And he told them words which meant more than just a practical answer. He says, if you're connected above, you don't fall down below. Right? Practically, he was telling them, I have, a goal that's very strong, I guess. But he was saying more than a moral lesson. When you're connected above, when you have the connection to Hashem, you have a real deep connection, you're not going to fall down. You're not going to lose yourself. You're not going to have moral failure because you're living something much deeper than yourself. When your values come from, I'm a strong value person, I believe in the right thing, and no one's going to know about it. We're not perfect, we're human. But if I'm believing in this because God wants me to do this, this is my mission, my purpose, and I have faith, this is real, then that's going to withstand. we're not going to fall into moral failure. And that's the two sides of the coins of being holy. You have to be connected above, and then we can really engage below. And then make sure our engagement below doesn't fall into gluttony, right? Like the Ramban's example, we'll eat, enjoy your steak, right? Rare or well done, however you like it. But it's not going to be because I just pleasure and you're not going to turn to the animal. You're going to remain with purpose. I'm eating this because I want to maybe be happier, which is going to make me be a better spouse or a better friend, a better parent. When I'm in a good mood, so I'm eating good food because that's how I present myself the best possible way to the world. The Talmud is the story of a rabbi who they asked him a question. He says, 1 second, let me eat my steak first, and I'll answer the question. My mind is activated when I eat good food. So he said, I'm going to eat dinner first, I have my steak lined up, and then I'll be able to think of the question. So there's sort of, food can inspire you. And same thing is with going on a vacation, right? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. As long as I'm opening my mind, I'm seeing the world. It's not because I'm becoming like, I'm just indulging myself. That can lead to a very negative place. But you always remain purposeful. This is part of me living my best life in order to do my best for the world. And so that keeps us in the checks and balances, not because internal, but because of our relationship with God. This, I think, translates back into the question of eating blood as well. And here's how I think so. Originally, the world was created. God told Adam and Eve, and the world is at your disposal. You are the human beings. You are the curators of the garden. You have to tend to all of the world. You're responsible for it. And you can eat from all the plants. You can eat their pure consumption, but not the animals. You can't kill an animal either. Only vegetation, plant life you let it eat. And so for the beginning of history, for the first, I don't know, till Noah's flood, at least a long time, over 1,000 years, human beings were not allowed to eat meats. After the flood of Noah, God tells Noah and his children, I am allowing you're allowed to eat animals. You're allowed to consume meat. And there's a lot of debate as to why they were then allowed, whether it was a concession, and God says, well, since you save the animals, I can't tell you can't eat them. You get credit. Or whether they've achieved now a deeper spiritual sensitivity and they're able to consume meat and still utilize that in their purpose. But the bottom line is God allowed to eat meat.
I think I read one that says that it's like an outlet for violence,
Ultimately,
because of good things must go bad. That's why you're not to people killing each other. Okay,
but then you eat animals and then you can, yeah, okay, yeah, another valid idea. So definitely, for some reason, God allowed meat then. And then, fast forward in history, God told the Jewish people, okay, you're allowed to eat meat. So obviously, it's within our moral code. It's okay. But don't eat the blood of the meat. Why? Because the soul of the animal is in the blood. What does that mean? God wasn't teaching them biology. God wasn't saying, well, the blood is what carries around the oxygen. That wasn't the point here. Blood is a symbol of passion, of excitement. Soul means it's alive. This is where you get your energy from. So perhaps God was telling the Jewish people, you can eat meat. You know why? Because we have a sort of a hierarchy of existence. The human being ultimately is the top of the food chain because we have moral purpose. We have idea of free choice. We are furthering the world towards its ultimate goal. Therefore, we can utilize the other resources of the world towards that end. We're kind of elevating them towards the common goal of the universe. And so if we need to eat meat to sustain ourselves, that's okay because it's now being elevated into this larger picture of our purpose of society. But if you're really eating for a purpose, it can't be complete indulgence and sort of passion in just the eating of meat. You have to engage in it. You got to eat meat. You got to engage in the world, but it always has to be some kind of hesitation that I'm doing this not because I enjoy it, it's my way of just fulfilling myself, but always reminded that I'm here for something bigger. I'm reminded that there's a bigger picture, a bigger purpose that I'm living for. And that way, you won't come to abuse that privilege you're given as a human being. So God telling the Jewish people, I don't want you to abuse your privilege. You're a privilege to eat meat. But go to the blood of meat. That's going to be a reminder that you're not going to get consumed in this sort of concern about meat. You're not going to stoop to the level of gluttony, of just enjoying steak because it's good and I want to feel good. You're going to live for something a little deeper. And so not only blood is a reminder of that hesitation, of that holding yourself back a little bit from totally indulging in this world. And so God was giving them sort of this double-edged sword. Eat, but don't fully. Engage, but always have also a little holding back. Remember why you're engaging. Remember why you're having this. The reason you're like an animal, if you're eating an animal and using that energy to do nothing, then you actually have no right to animal. Because why your life any more worthwhile his life? If you are living a human existence, if you are living up to human potential, then okay, you're now using that meat, that animal, within the ultimate purpose of creation. So then okay, a dispensation to consume meat. But if you're living no better than an animal's living, if you're just living one day to the next day to just to be, then you have no sort of you're sort of morally equivalent with the animal. And then you have no right to eat it. And so not allowing us to fully consume it, and the blood especially, which has to do with the soul, that's a reminder to us that we have to remember why we're here, why we're engaging. And that goes back to the holiness. When you have something deeper you're living for, you're going to engage in a way that's positive and productive. And you use that. And look around animal consumption, there's all these guardrails Torah gives. You have to explore the animal in a very specific way, which is considered very humane and painless in the slaughtering process. You cannot eat limbs of a living animal. You cannot abuse the animals at all. If you have a pet, Torah says you have to feed your pet before you feed yourself. You have to treat animals well. And so there's this notion that when the dispensation is given to consume meat, there's this caveat. So yeah, this caveat. The blood you can't have. Don't get so engaged, so passionate about eating the meat. Allow yourself to realize why you're doing this. Where can your passion lie? What was blood allowed to be used for? It had to be used for? When you brought an offering, you have the Parsha also, the blood needs to be sprinkled on the altar. And so the symbolism is this passion, this life, this excitement, this enthusiasm directed towards holy things in the temple. So yes, you should go to work, you should be a man of the world, have families, but where should your passion lie? Where should your ultimate life? In your faith, in your purpose. That's where your excitement should be. That's what's governing how you engage in the world. Your Shabbat should be your favorite day of the week. And it should give you context and a moral compass for how to engage in the next 6 days of work. As a moral person, as a upstanding, upright person, dealing business correctly. So absolutely, in a way, the 6 days a week are more valuable than Shabbat. Because you're achieving more of a purpose in this world when you engage in business honestly than you are sitting in a Sunday and praying. You're doing more for society, more for the purpose of the universe when you go to work and your kids understand when you're doing business honestly, that's fulfilling more of a purpose than sitting and praying and studying. But the only way you can do that with integrity is if you have the Shabbat, if you have the day when you're investing in your relationship with God with your purpose. And so there has to be always that give and take. And when you have that, then when you go to work 6 days a week, you're not going to be blinded by greed. You're not going to be, when you're passionate about making money, for money's sake, greed takes you. But I'm making money because I can support my family and give charity and do good things with it, then I have a whole different approach. It's the same thing. That's the blood. Go make money, but don't make blood. Don't be passionate about it for its own sake. Remember why you're doing it. Because I'm here for living life for a purpose. And I think is the reason the Torah emphasized again and again this prohibition. 6, 7 times. And then here we had a couple parshas ago, later on in Deuteronomy, we had it in Genesis as well. There's this constant emphasis at every stage. Remember, yes, Torah is all about engaging with the world, all about being a good person within society. But remember, the way to do that is you're eating the meat. This is obviously a metaphor from logic. You're eating meat, but you're not taking its blood. Because the reason you're eating meat is you have a purpose deep in that invested. And so in this sort of explanation, eating blood is symbolic. It's not, the other commentaries kind of saw blood as being inherently immoral or desensitizing. Here it's more of a symbolic commentary of blood symbolizing passion for its own sake. And God was kind of warning or encouraging the Jewish people to the blood. Hold a little bit back. Remember that you have a purpose that's guiding you, directing you in how you engage with the world.